Okay, welcome everybody to the 10th episode of the Lucid Truth. Today we have Taylor Hayes. Taylor, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, we're happy to have you. Can you tell everyone a little bit about why you're here and what you want to talk about?
Sure. So I'm here, I guess, mostly because of psychedelic nursing. I shared some information on social media about the International Association of Psychedelic Nursing. That kind of led me to you guys to talk more about that and to talk about my experiences leading up to that and all of my work to do with psychedelics and nursing.
That is amazing. I didn't know such a group existed, but it makes me very happy to know that it's out there.
Yes, it's very new. We are very, very new. We have just over 100 members right now, and we're kind of coming together to form our organization this year. So this is all brand new, cutting edge kind of stuff, and it's very exciting seeing the legal climate kind of change around psychedelics and the stigma is starting to go away on a widespread in a widespread kind of way. And so I feel like we are emerging as an organization kind of at a perfect time and perfect opportunity here to make a big impact in healthcare and in our society.
What did you experience that made you get into the idea of psychedelics? Because you started in mental health as a nurse in the regular system, correct?
Right, that's right. So I guess that's kind of like my life story of how I got to this point, but I can give you kind of the brief version is that I struggled with my mental health myself since I was 11 years old. I started having suicidal thoughts and I was very depressed. I was sexually assaulted when I was 13 by a group of men. It was the first time I had ever drank alcohol before. I never told anybody and I kind of repressed all of the feelings that I had over that and it just worsened my depression. When I was 15, I was kind of trapped in a relationship with a boy who would threaten to kill himself every time I tried to break up with him. And he would also sexually assault me frequently. I never told anyone about these things. When I was in college as a 19-year-old, I was suffering from depression, anxiety, eating disorder, suicidal thoughts, dissociative symptoms. But I was also a 4.0 honors scholarship student. You know, I was doing well on the surface. If you looked at me, at my life, everything looked like it was fine, but I didn't feel okay. So I went to student services to receive help. I went through counseling. I was on multiple medications. None of that ever really helped me very much. The medicines that I were on, it was just SSRIs and an antipsychotic medication to help with the dissociative symptoms I was having, and it made me feel like a zombie. It didn't make me want to live. It didn't make me excited about my life. When I was in college, I was around the same time period. I was handed a psychedelic mushroom. I had never seen one before. I was drunk at a party and someone handed me this and I was like whatever and I ate it and I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to eat it. It was everybody's just kind of gawking at this item and I was just like what the hell, I'll eat it. And so I just ate it and the whole room went silent and was like, oh my god, what did this girl just do? And I mean, I just had this profound experience and it was just like all of a sudden I started caring about myself. I started caring about other people. I started caring about staying alive. And this experience kind of like a slingshot and it made me care about my health. It made me change my diet. It made me look at the food I was eating and the exercise I was having and how much time I was spending outside and how much time I was on my computer and how can I change these things because being depressed, that's not our natural state. That's not normal. For my whole life, I thought, oh, this is just how it is. And I think even my mom told me it's just kind of, that's just what people have is depression. And I just had believed that for my whole life. So I had this experience. It's not true. You don't have to be depressed forever. There is another option out there. So I had this profound experience and I went back to my doctor and I told him, I said, hey, I'm going to change my diet and my lifestyle. And I had this profound experience with mushrooms. And I think that I don't need to be a patient anymore. I was like, I'm good to go. He said, everything checks out. You're good. You seem like you're not depressed anymore. You're not having any symptoms. So I was inspired by the help that I had received talking to me, wanting to help me, but their medicines weren't very helpful. So I felt like I needed to get into healthcare myself. And that's when I decided to go to nursing school. So it was at a time when I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I thought, I just want to get as many people this healing experience that I have had. And so how can I do that? And I thought, I'm just going to be a nurse. I'm going to be a nurse and I'm going to help people, and maybe someday I can help bring psychedelics to more people. So yeah, I went to nursing school. I graduated. Everything went fine. And I knew that I wanted to work in psychiatry just due to my past experiences with psychiatry. I was like, well, I feel pretty suited to help these people. I feel called to help psychiatric patients. It's a population that a lot of people are afraid of, or there's a lot of misunderstanding about what psych patients are. And in my experience, it's been mostly people who want to harm themselves, not who are a danger to others. So I started working on a local inpatient psychiatric unit, and my doctor, who I had seen as a patient, he also worked there. He was the medical director of the psychiatric unit, and we became friends. We became very close friends. He was very supportive of psychedelics. He said it changed his life to see how much I had improved. He's from going to wanting to die every day for years and years, and not responding to any of the pharmacological agents he had prescribed me, to now just being very healthy, very active, into yoga, into living, into traveling, art and poetry, and all these things that, beforehand I had no interest in anything. Anyways, he continued to encourage me and support me in using these substances. I began traveling to other countries to take these substances. I went to Jamaica for the world's first women's psilocybin retreat in March of 2018. So it was a group of all women at Myco Meditations. It was great. My psychiatrist, who was my friend, he was following my psychedelic experiences. He evaluated me under the influence of psychedelics multiple times, and we began this romantic relationship together. He wanted me to be like a nurse practitioner who worked with him as an expert on psychedelics, because we both kind of saw this legal climate changing around psychedelics and cannabis. Again, I went down to South America, and I went to the Ayahuasca Foundation Riesbo Research Center, stayed there for a month, and participated we had 11 ayahuasca ceremonies in 1 month. Again, I left there. Once I left there, I studied with some indigenous healers in Cusco, Peru, with Huachuma or San Pedro medicine, which is mescaline, the cactus. It was an incredible experience. When I came home, again, my doctor was talking to me through these experiences as I was on mescaline, asking me questions, preparation methods and route of administration, and, adverse effects, and how do I think this will fit into healthcare, and, what kind of standards and procedures need to be in place. And these were all the types of conversations that we had over these medicines. Unfortunately, about 6 months after that, he came to my home and he physically and sexually assaulted me, immobilized me, held a knife to my throat, and threatened my life. Criminal charges are now pending, but he definitely was very inspirational to me as far as developing the International Association of Psychedelic Nursing. He contributed a lot of information to encouraging me in following these passions that I had, and encouraging that education. I lost my job for talking about this publicly. So I had a job on the inpatient psychiatric unit. And when I talked about this experience publicly, I lost my job. So now I'm working on a mushroom farm, and I'm completing my master's program. I'm still in nurse practitioner school, which I'll finish at the end of this year with honors. But now I'm just working on Hope Network Health, which is a series of retreats run by licensed healthcare professionals with psychedelic experience. I'm all about practitioners having experience with psychedelics if they're going to recommend and evaluate people under the influence of psychedelics. I think it's enormously important. Otherwise, that the motivation behind the administration or evaluation of the practitioner is in question. I feel like there's a lot of risk involved if your practitioner has no experience with psychedelics. They don't know, how incredibly empathetic or spiritual experiences these patients and clients are having and how open their hearts are, how vulnerable they are under the influence of psychedelics. So I think that having a practitioner who is aware and experienced is absolutely key to the success of psychedelic healing widespread throughout the world.
So you were on such a roll there. I didn't want to interrupt you, and you
Yeah,
kind of
no, we can
covered.
go back and talk about points.
One of the things that you said that, well, you said a lot of things that I was thinking about, but one of the first things that you said that got me thinking was that all of a sudden you were interested in all of these things when before you weren't interested in anything. What was it like, the process of getting to know yourself and the process of finding your interests? And
Yeah, so it really felt like, I want to say like a light switch or something, and it's like black and white or flipping a coin, and all of a sudden wasn't interested in staying alive, and now I'm just incredibly grateful for every moment that I have to be alive. I wasn't connected to this purpose or like any sort of spirituality, and when I took the mushroom, it was just like bam, all, I mean, in just a couple of hours, or I almost want to say in one moment, it was just like everything made sense, everything fell into place. I just started finding beauty in things that I used to find uninteresting, whereas the grass growing I used to take it for granted. Now it was just this crazy interesting biological process that I wanted to know more about, chemistry and biology, and what was animating these processes. What does it mean to thrive, and what does it mean to express yourself,
answer that one for me.
individuality?
What does it mean to thrive?
So thriving, there's surviving and there's thriving. And before, I felt like I was just surviving, where every day I was just dragging myself through the motions, trying to survive, trying not to kill myself. I feel like I was absolutely the biggest risk to myself, not harming myself. So just surviving, getting through day to day and not even really enjoying anything. Thriving would be, fully reaching your potential and fully kind of like living in this activated state of empowerment. So you're empowered, you're living in aligned with your purpose, and you receive the blessings beyond anything you could have ever dreamed for yourself. So I mean, when I was a child, I never dreamed that I would even live to be this old right now. And that seems very ridiculous thing to say, but now I'm very grateful, and I never would have dreamed that I would be involved in all the activities that I am now. So if I had killed myself, I never would have graduated school, and I never would have had the opportunity to start the International Association of Psychedelic Nursing, and I never would have the opportunity to share, healing with the world. But that was before that I knew healing was a possibility.
I must say, you have had a quite powerful journey. And the experience that you had where like your life transformed, that was with the help of psychedelics, right?
Yes, I would say conscious transformation is one of the things that I focus on. And so I focus on that both with psychedelics and without psychedelics. So I also have a shamanism practice that began after I started using psychedelics, but a large part of my shamanism practices are working with a sober mind.
Yeah, that's a good balance because if everything is with the aid of a psychedelic, then in a way you're kind of dependent on the external stimuli to reach the states that you want to reach internally. But it's
Right.
not to say that the psychedelics don't have their use. That change in consciousness is their most useful function. And I think that's why doctors shouldn't prescribe it, like you said, unless they've experienced it. Because if they don't really understand, they can't really empathize with you. There's one example I can think of where some physician team is trying to extract the psychedelic experience from the psychedelic. So you don't have any hallucinations, visuals, or feelings, and it will physiologically heal you. And that's not what it's about. It's not some chemical transformation in the brain like Prozac that makes you happier. It's the nature of the transcendent experience like you've described it.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And there's many practices that one can use for conscious transformation. There's countless meditation practices one can follow, martial arts, journaling, creating art. Any of these things can be, consciousness expanding activities, and you don't have to be under the influence of psychedelics to appreciate or to employ these modalities. I mean, I feel like they all kind of go together, but I don't see any need for psychedelics as a crutch. I mean, I don't use psychedelics frequently, I don't think it's necessary that once you get the message, you have lots of work to do in the sober world to really fully achieve your purpose and get all the work done that you need to do in your lifetime. We don't spend all of our time just under the influence of psychedelics, or else you would never do anything. You'd never accomplish anything. It's very beautiful space, when you're having these hallucinations and seeing all these things. But the important part is that you come back to reality, the physical reality that we all share, and put the work in and get the work done and do what you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I like how Terrence McKenna says it. He says, like, meditation practices, which are very useful for many people, they don't necessarily guarantee a shift in consciousness. It might happen depending on how much practice you put in, the kind of person you are, that kind of thing. But you take a mushroom, something will happen. And we know that much for sure.
That's very true. Although I will say, I don't know, I know many people who've taken mushrooms who, I don't want to say nothing good happened of it, but they didn't have any lasting lifestyle changes or anything.
Right.
And I think a lot of that comes down to the intention they had behind taking the medicine. So they didn't really have a medicinal approach to it. It was more maybe a recreational use, or, a really, it wasn't a sacramental or a sacred experience to them. It was, bored and going downtown for drinks and going to the bar. So we're going to take some mushrooms. And that's just not the kind of experience with psychedelics that I advocate for or recommend to anybody. It's really can be unsafe for you. It can be confusing. It can damage your psyche. I definitely think that what you get out of your psychedelic experience has a lot to do with your approach to the psychedelic experience.
I want to jump in and go back a little bit because I was thinking about how diametrically opposed trauma and psychedelic experiences are. They're kind of the opposite thing. In the same way that a single psychedelic experience can change your life for the positive, very traumatic incident can change your life for the negative, and it's just as instantaneous. So I was thinking about that. You've had a few of these, and thank you for sharing that on the air. That's really vulnerable and kind of hard to do. But what would you recommend for the person who just went through this intense traumatic experience and they've had like the anti-psychedelic experience to where it propels them into this depression or suicidal thoughts or other mental problems?
I would definitely recommend finding a therapist or, a provider of some kind that is psychedelic friendly. Once you first come out of that traumatic incident, it's important to maybe have a friend, have somebody to completely open up to and talk about it with, who won't judge your experience or judge what you've been going through, and be able to talk about that in a sober way before you make any kind of decision to try to heal that trauma with psychedelics. Sit down, have a discussion with your provider who is experienced with psychedelic use. Talk to them, see what they think would be best for you. Be honest with yourself. If you want to seek psychedelic use to heal that trauma and go into, in a conscious way approach the medicine, I think that it would be very beneficial. I haven't really seen anything, any psychedelic experience turn out badly when approached in that way. And I've seen a lot of absolutely almost unbelievable healing experiences come out of psychedelic use. So I think it's absolutely one of our very best options for some of the most severe traumas that people face. So
I do want to interject there. There is a correlation between the activation of things like schizophrenia and the use of psychedelics, and that's something to not cast aside. Like, you want to call it just a medicine because it helped me out so much, it's helped you out so much. It's really easy just to think of it in that way, but there are risks involved. My claim would be, there's no way to prove this, but my claim would be the people who activate their schizophrenia when they take a psychedelic were likely going to develop it later, like in their late 20s.
Right.
And they just activated it early. But that's still that psychosis that comes from taking a psychedelic for the first time sometimes is not something to discount, and it is a risk factor to consider that may not be affected by set and setting or anything like that.
Right. And what I will say on that is, from all of the research that I've read, is that there is not a higher incidence of schizophrenia or psychosis within the psychedelic population. So it's like, I believe it's 1% of people across all populations develop psychosis. So it's not really a demographic thing. It's not a drug use thing. It's kind of like 1% all across the board. And while it may, a psychedelic event is it can be very intense experience, which may be the event that triggers psychosis, but I don't want to say that it directly causes psychosis in anyone.
Interesting. It might have something to do with the fact that psychedelics used to be psychometric, psychosis inducing. So that used to be the stigmatization associated with the actual terminology. So maybe that carried over into that realm. I do know that if you have schizophrenia, one of the other risks is that you have increased serotonin production. And if you have increased serotonin production or you're on SSRIs, then it could lead to serotonin syndrome, which is why I appreciate your advice about seeking out a healthcare professional to see if they want to give you psychedelics. I think you're right about the intention too. Some people have really great, amazing trips, about 90%, but then you have those 10% that don't have a great trip. Do you think you could find out before the administration of the psychedelic who's going to have a good experience and who's not, so you can select out the people who don't have the intention that's associated with a positive time?
Back to what you said about seeking out a practitioner, I think it's important, if you're on any kind of prescribed medications, absolutely the safest thing to do would be to consult a healthcare provider before you take any kind of drug, psychedelic or otherwise. It would be, you're putting your own health at risk ultimately. So definitely do your homework, your own personal homework, as well as consulting a provider or professional before you take any drugs, because it can kill you. It can sometimes lead to serotonin syndrome, or, especially with ayahuasca, there's some contraindicated medications, absolutely. But generally speaking, psychedelics are very safe medicines that you can't typically overdose on, and there's no risk involved, no respiratory depression or anything like that, no addiction. So that's good to be aware of. As far as screening out people who would have a bad experience, as long as the provider talks to the patient or the client about their intentions going in, and if they have, an open heart to trying this experience, sometimes psychedelics do put you in a bad headspace, even if you have the correct set and setting. And that isn't always, ultimately a bad thing. I myself have had many difficult psychedelic experiences, but in the end, in the long run, it's been very positive. Like, positive things have been gained. I've had to look at things that are very difficult to look at within myself, but you work with it, you overcome it, you learn from it. I know many people who it hasn't pushed them away from psychedelics. So I don't know that it's necessarily most important to rule out all bad experiences, because bad is just a judgment. I think a difficult experience can ultimately make you a stronger person. That being said, every precaution should be taken to support a beneficial experience for every client.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally get what you're saying. I had a bad trip once where I had to go through hell, but it led me to heaven in the end. Like, it actually balanced out, and it was worth the suffering. It's like the old Buddhist mantra, like, life is suffering, but when you learn how to overcome it, it helps you face just about everything else in the future. So I think those experiences can be like that for many people too.
Totally. And if you have a supportive guide or facilitator who can help you kind of, as you integrate after the experience is over, and this person helps you integrate what these scary feelings or thoughts that you had, I think that many clients can say, similar to like you said, it was worth it in the end, and I learned so much, and yeah, it was scary when I was there, but it was worth it, and it was good, and it made me, stronger person, better person.
Awesome. So, where do you see psychedelics being integrated into conventional healthcare, and where do you see conventional healthcare not being able to receive the benefit of what psychedelics have to offer? Where do you see those two worlds kind of merging together?
I think that MDMA therapy will be one of the first kind of psychedelic options available. And I think that's a really great place to start, because it's almost like you almost can't have a bad experience with MDMA. It's I mean, it's known as, the love drug and ecstasy, and allowing people to re-experience these horribly traumatic events in a different way, and reconnect to those memories in a different way, and reach a new understanding of why they went through them. So I think that will be kind of the first psychedelic integrated in widespread through the U.S. healthcare system. Other medicines that people like ayahuasca, I think there will be difficulty integrating something like that into the U.S. modern healthcare system, just because the intense purging and all of that. I see that as being, that's going to be much harder, I think, to get into the healthcare system, just the way it is based now. I don't want to say it'll never be there. It's just gonna, that's a long way down the road. Whereas we can focus on the less out there, I would say, psychedelics like MDMA. That's a lot easier to see the benefit, whereas ayahuasca it's more of like seems like a shot in the dark or something. I don't know. But there is some good research going on with ayahuasca. I love ayahuasca myself, but I do see there being some issues as far as integrating that into the healthcare system. And it's just finding, the right place for all these medicines, the right applications, so that we don't hurt anybody, because the purpose of medicine is just to help people, not to make them worse, not to re-traumatize them, not to kill them. We're just trying to improve things.
Yeah, so interestingly with ayahuasca, the purge can actually be removed by taking out the tannins, and egg whites are remarkably effective for that. So you take some egg whites, put it in your brew, they'll absorb all of the tannins, and then most of the time you won't purge. There's still a possibility of purging. Now, some shamans will say, no, you must keep the purge, it's part of the spiritual experience, and other people will say, I am not about that. So I think it depends on the person. And interestingly, I think what you said about ayahuasca still rings true, even if you don't have the purge, because it's such a powerful psychedelic experience that I think starting with something like MDMA that's a little easier on the system and a little less, psychologically kind of crazy, will be easier to integrate these medicines on a gradual basis rather than boom, ayahuasca.
Yeah, I'm not about just opening all the floodgates all at once, and everything getting muddled and confused, and that's just not the way to build a sustainable healthcare system or integrate these things sustainably. So more research is needed, at least on ayahuasca. I wasn't aware about the tannins and the egg whites. That's interesting. I don't know that the purging should be removed from ayahuasca. I don't know. I feel like very powerful experiences when you purge, and you're like giving up some things that you've been holding on to in your body, and it's like part of the ayahuasca experience that I don't know that it should be removed. I mean, it's a personal preference, I guess, but if you get benefit from the egg white way, then go for it.
My thoughts on that are that it's about the intention, it's about what you think about it. And so it's a really beneficial thing to tell somebody, like, you are going to purge and this is a healthy thing. You're getting rid of things that you've been holding on to. But what if that's just a way of coping with the fact that it sucks to throw up, and like putting that thought into your head makes it a positive experience when you could be breathing in the goodness and exhaling the badness with just breathing, and accomplishing the same thing without having to actually be vomiting or whatever.
My church said it was an unconscious demon that had been released from me when I purged the first time, and it was in like 5 minutes. I drank it, purged before any psychedelic experiences came through, and they were like, "Oh, there goes that unconscious demon." I was like, "Oh, okay, good. I'm glad I don't have that anymore."
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I could see where both of y'all, have good points. I like the purging. I think, like you said, it kind of helps you get rid of some demons or beliefs or something holding you back. I don't know. But at the same time, yes, I think you can also get tons of benefit from meditation and breathing. And there's so many, consciousness expanding modalities that could all be beneficial for mental health. And I'm a proponent for so many different things, just whatever gets people moving and helping and what they're passionate about, that's, helping the world. And that's what I'm for.
Awesome. Same. You mentioned at the start of the video that you wanted to support the destigmatization of psychedelics. And first off, coming out as a professional in support of psychedelics is part of the process of doing that. So thank you for that, because that shows other people in those professional settings that they can do that too. Because oftentimes people are afraid of retribution, of things that might happen to them in their work life, in their public life, and in their family, personal life. And so it inhibits a lot of people from expressing who they are when it comes to this. And it's kind of a sad thing because these experiences are so powerful that you want to share them with others. And feeling restricted from doing that, it's kind of sad that that's the way that things are. But by speaking up about this stuff, it kind of helps to destigmatize it. What other ways do you think we could help to work on destigmatizing psychedelics to the general public?
I used to be very afraid of talking about psychedelics. I was afraid of, is this going to affect work? Is this going to affect school? Is this going to affect my license? What are people going to think about me? But I knew in my heart that it was powerful medicine. It was real medicine. So I started talking about it by sharing research and not personal experiences. So I started talking, sharing it at work with other people like, hey, this MAP study, sharing information about the MDMA with veterans and treating PTSD, and kind of opening that conversation in a way where you can't really argue otherwise. It's like, this is helping veterans who are killing themselves in mass, and look at the research here. And a lot of people who ordinarily would have shut down if they were like, oh, drug user or something, and have that thought and that stigma, lash out, they were like, it opened their mind, and they're like, oh, like, we can apply this quote unquote party drug to help people who are really suffering, and this is to help, service people, like people who are really helping us. It doesn't have to be just this recreational thing, like, so I recommend people share the research. Personal and anecdotal experiences are valuable too. But as far as changing stigma and all of that goes, I think that sticking with the research is definitely the most powerful thing that anybody could do.